Another way to graph a frequency distribution is to use what is called a frequency polygon. But that's going to be a different polygon than you're used to from geometry. So it's a line graph that emphasizes the continuous change of frequencies. And this is an example here of our frequency polygon. Notice that this 86.5 is the midpoint of the first class. First class had a frequency of 5, so that's why they plotted this point over here. And the gap between each one of these values on the x scale are exactly the same. So 142 was the second midpoint, or the midpoint for the second class, and that had a frequency of 8, and so on. And this roughly has exactly the same shape as the frequency histogram. We could also create a relative frequency histogram. Right, and that has exactly the same shape and same horizontal scale as the corresponding frequency histogram. So these numbers down here are exactly the same. The only difference is that instead of keeping track of with the frequency, we're going to keep track of the relative frequency. So same class boundaries, but instead of this going up to 5, this goes up to 0.17, which was the relative class frequency, or that was the relative frequency for that class. And lastly, if you want to describe the number of data entries that are equal to or below a certain value, you can do that by constructing what is called a cumulative frequency graph. And sometimes it'll be called an ogive. I'll probably call it a cumulative frequency graph, not an ogive. And this is just a line graph that displays the cumulative frequencies of each class at its upper class boundary. So we start with our midpoints, and you can just start plotting away. And let's see. So our upper class boundary for the first class was 114.5, and that had a frequency of 5. The next upper class boundary was 170.5, and that had a frequency, a cumulative frequency of 13, and so on. So this is always going to be increasing until you get to the very end with the last upper class boundary, which for us is 450.5, and that has a cumulative frequency of 30.